If you look at the schedule, my talk is titled Reading the Unreadable, Viewing the Unviewable. It's really more, it's the use and abuse of CT scanners. The auspices of the project is really the Apocalypto project, which is some work I was employed to do to try to read old scrolls, old documents. But when you've got a CT scanner sitting in your lab, it finds all sorts of other uses. X-rays are boring. You have X-rays when you've hurt yourself. Most people, their sole experience of having an X-ray is you've slipped over, you've broken your arm, you've done something really nasty, or maybe not as nasty as this. All you care about is, where's my painkillers coming from? When can I get this over and done with? When am I going to be back on the ski slope? When am I going to be able to walk? When can I use my arm again? You don't care about the technology. You don't care what's going on. You don't pay really any attention to it unless, well, I broke my collarbone years ago and I was more interested in the X-ray scanner, but most people are not. You care about getting out of there. But X-rays are useful. We use them for looking inside people. We use them they're used just to check whether boxes of cornflakes are full up to the correct level. You can do it weighing, but stuff settles. You can take a quick X-ray image. Doesn't have to be fantastic, but it will tell you if your package is as full as you need it to be. But X-rays are fairly simple technology, invented sort of early 1900s, maybe around a little bit before then. But they're essentially a 2D image. The only way you can see this is a 3D arm is the fact some of these bones appear to be in front of other bones. You've got no 3D information there. When you make a 3D X-ray, it's a CT scan, CT scans are absolutely terrifying because if you're in a hospital having a CT scan, something's gone even more wrong than snapping your arm in multiple places. If you're having a CT scan, you've had a serious accident or you've got a suspect tumour or something has really, really gone wrong. Usually you care even less about the technology that's going on. All you want is make me better, fix me, tell me I'm going to walk again, whatever. CT scans can be absolutely terrifying. But CT scans show you interesting things. They don't just show you the fact you may have a fatty liver and a great big tumour which is pressing against it. CT scans can show you interesting things, and that's really what this talk is about. So what do CT scans give you? Well, first of all, why X-rays? So if you take photographs of people in different wavelengths, so if you photograph a person in the UV, you see all the damage the sun has done to their skin. The same photograph in the visible, you see what makeup she's wearing. In the infrared, you get some features slightly below the skin. Depending on how well you focus the camera, you get some slightly different, it makes a smoother looking image. She looks a lot whiter in that because the skin is reflecting the infrared radiation quite well. If you take a photograph of a sort of a tree in the IR, it's bright white. The sky will be pitch black unless there's clouds, but the tree will be bright white. It's reflecting infrared. So yeah, you can get information if you take a normal camera. All of these, you can take this image if you've got a standard DSLR camera, you take the IR filter out. If you put filters in that block the visible and the infrared, you'll be able to take UV images. If you put filters in that block the visible and the UV, you can take IR images. So you can do this with standard technology. You go and spend sort of a couple £100. You can be in the field of doing multispectral imaging. This is the catch-all term for this now, so multispectral imaging. X-rays are just a bit different. Well, what are X-rays? X-rays are, Daniel George already showed this image. It's the electromagnetic spectrum. She's working here. Our eyes are working here. Your microwave oven is working about there. I'm working about here. I worked out earlier the frequency I'm working at. I'm actually working at 9 times 10 to the 18 hertz, which is well past terahertz. Anyone know offhand what 10 to the 18 is? It's well past tera. I don't remember what the correct power of 10 is. But X-rays are just light. They're the same as visible light. They're still photons. They're just shifted up a bit. They carry a bit more energy. We know how you make light. You get something hot, it starts emitting light. In fact, if you get something hot, it starts emitting down here, and the hotter it gets, starts emitting up into the microwave range, then into the IR, The Planck blackbody spectrum that Daniel Jules was measuring at 27 gigahertz or whatever is somewhere in this region. And it gets shifted up. You get things really, really hot. Well, they start looking yellow, and you get them hotter and hotter. You start getting some emission in the UV, but you can't get most things that hot. To start getting X-rays out of them, you've really got to heat them up, make them hot. How do you make X-rays? Well, you use a small fermion collider. Everyone knows the Large Hadron Collider. An X-ray machine is a small fermion collider. Fermions are electrons, and you're whacking them against a target. You don't have a 27-kilometre tunnel. You have a gap of about 10 centimetres, and you stick a couple of 1,000 volts across it. The electrons boil off a filament. So in this case, this is a great big high voltage power supply, which nowadays would be about so big in switch mode. This glass tube is his X-ray tube. He's bringing a couple of 1,000 volts across to a point, and there's another anode in there. Electrons are boiling off, hitting the anode. X-rays are coming down, irradiating this guy's hand. That's how you make X-rays. It's still how you make X-rays. You fire electrons, you fire a stream of electrons at a target. You generate radiation as the electrons break. As the electrons hit the target and stop, you generate Bremsstrahlung radiation. And you tune the wavelength of the radiation by the energy of the X-rays. So you put a higher voltage across, you make more penetrating X-rays. The first guy that really did this was Wilhelm Röntgen. And he made a piece of equipment that looked fairly similar to this. And his wife, Berta, was walking past the lab one day, and he was, darling, come stick your hand in this for me, please, and don't ask too many questions while you're doing it. She did. The outcome was this, which was the first medical X-ray image. And you can see the bones of her hand, and you can see her gold wedding ring. Berta, being a maybe slightly pessimistic lady, said, I have seen my death. Not that she didn't actually die from X-ray radiation. She lived a long and happy life, but she saw a skeletal hand. So X-rays show you what's inside things. They show you the inside of Berta Röntgen's hand. They show you the inside of a cold cathode fluorescent lamp which had failed in the lab sometime last year. And it was almost brand new, and we wondered just why it had failed. And it was the fuse in the base had actually gone. But you can see what's going inside the lamp. Nice solder contact shows up well in X-rays. Glass shows up reasonably well, and there's actually some drops of mercury inside the lamp which show up well, but not in this image. And you've got the electronics to drive it. X-rays show you what's inside things. So you detect what's passing through. So instead of reflection with UV, IR, you're seeing what reflects off of your object. With X-rays, you're looking to see what's inside. Airport X-ray scanners that you go through and have to do this, they look at what reflects off of you, but that's a slightly different technology. So the nature of imaging, what are you actually seeing with X-rays? Well, if we go back to a slightly improved image of Berta's hand, I think it is, the contrast mechanism is really what the elements are. So gold shows up very nicely. It's a nice heavy metal, shows up wonderfully. Bone, it's calcium and phosphorus primarily. Lots of water and fat and other stuff in it, but elementally it's calcium and phosphorus. Flesh, water and carbon. Doesn't show up so well. Flesh is not so great. If you've got a lot of bone in one place, shows up almost as good as a small amount of gold. A larger thickness of bone shows up just as well as a small thickness of metal. So how does this help us? What does it mean? If you want to image inside an object, or you want to look for things that are obscured, you can use X-rays. What it means is a substrate, so the thing that is written on needs to not show up too strongly in the X-rays. It's no good looking for carbon ink or a biro someone has written on a 2-inch thick sheet of lead. The lead will show up fantastically, you'll never see anything else. But luckily things we write on paper, parchment, book, wood, bark, those sort of things, are essentially made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. They're flesh as far as the X-rays are concerned. Ink needs to contain iron, copper, gold, silver, mercury, etc., something heavier. And luckily it does for most cases. And you're very unlikely to see carbon ink on graphite or paper, or you're very unlikely to see carbon ink on lead. Lunch shows up really well, but I'll come back to that. So if you've got an X-ray machine in your lab and you can image anything you like, what sort of things do you image? So this is one of my X-ray machines. This is why I'm not a mutant yet. That door is solid lead. That is solid lead. This is a steel frame. There's lead all around it. The thing weighs about 4 tons. We're actually sitting on a floating floor in work, and there were some comments about whether it would actually stay on the floor if it had sink down. So far, it's been there a few years. It's fine. The bigger system, which is the one that's actually sitting behind me when I sit at my desk, is even heavier. But we've got a great big steel load spreading plate underneath that. So what do you scan? Well, this is MuCat2 at Queen Mary, University of London. So we had another Queen Mary presenter I didn't realise here today. It's MuCat for micro-computed aided tomography. These are scanners. So these are like medical CT scanners, but they're optimised for looking at much smaller things in much higher contrast. So you look at things like your boss's daughter's tooth. She was actually quite young when this was extracted, and there is a lot going on. If you're a dentist, well, even if you're not a dentist, you look at that and go, that is a manky looking tooth. This is just a slice through the tooth after we've scanned it. That's a good thing about CT scanning. This is a 3D scan. If I had the data file here, I could give it to somebody and they could do a 3D print of this. Or you could take a virtual slice through it in this direction or this direction and see what's going on. This is a 3D point cloud of data, all grayscale. And so Graham brought his daughter's tooth in. We scanned it. She was really happy. She got to stick it under a pillow and give it to the tooth fairy. And she also got to look to see what it was like. And this is pretty nasty. That's not a mercury filling, but it's a pretty dense filling. And there's all this sort of mess going on. It's a pretty horrible tooth, and the root snapped off. I'm in a medical school. I should have said, really. I'm in a medical school. I'm not a dentist. I'm a physicist. I'm an electronics engineer, really, these days. But I'm in a medical school, so I have to scan teeth and bones. And so sometimes there are bones to scan. This is a volume rendered human hip bone that we scanned. This is sort of where it goes off into the leg. The hip is here. This is the top of the leg. And the project this was looking for were these lesions which grow out of the bone and cause pain. They're a form of arthritis. And the interest was to see, do these things actually extend all the way down, or are they just surface features? So we scanned the whole human hip bone, got it published. We got some really useful information. And you can see the sort of structure of bone. You can see how all these trabeculae join up. Bone isn't solid. There's lots of air spaces in there, but the load is spread amongst the struts and things. Kind of how you do 3D printing, really. You don't necessarily print something solid. If it doesn't need to be solid, you want it lightweight, you have a structure inside. So these are the kind of things that pay my day-to-day work. Other times, you get something like this. And this kind of relates back into scanning the old documents, which I'll get onto in a second. You make ink, or you made ink, iron gall ink, by grinding up oak acorns would have been infested with these parasitic wasps, which makes the oak tree just surround the thing full of tannins, which are highly toxic to the wasps. And as you grind this up and you mix it with rust, you mix it with other chemicals, you mix it with urine, you mix it with wine, you mix it with blood, you mix it with sort of this. Ink making was a sort of a fairly alchemical process. So everyone had their own secret recipe. Really, you need rust and you need tannin. You don't need much else, but everyone put other stuff in there, which was great. It was contaminants, contains heavy metal, you see it in X-rays. So this, read it. This oak apple was one that was given to me. Is it going to play? No? Okay. But you saw there were multiple wasps in there. When we actually showed this to entomologists, because it's published, you only get one wasp per oak apple. We showed it to entomologists. We made this fantastic discovery. There's more than one wasp per oak apple. And I went, oh yeah, we all know that. Just no one's ever corrected the literature. So we thought we'd found something really good, and it was like, everyone knows it, just no one's published it. Okay. Yeah, so this is all done with free software. This is rendered in a program called Drishti, which is by the Australian National University, their data visualization lab. And you give it one of our data files we get. And this is all 3D data. This is an X-ray taken. We rotate the sample a bit, take another X-ray, rotate a bit, take another X-ray. So you've got 360 degrees worth of projections. And you can see wasps, and yeah, we're cutting this in different directions, and there's at least 4 wasps in this that we see. But they're all horrible, dried out, desiccated, so we can't really do anything interesting with them. So into documents. In the sort of early 2006, there was a conference at the Rutherford Appleton laboratory, and my boss is an expert in X-ray imaging. The guy that asked him the question is an expert on collagen, and he was head of the ophthalmology department at the University of Cardiff at the time, but he's not an optician. He's an expert in collagen. My boss was an expert in X-ray imaging, but not a dentist, and he's in the dental school. And the ophthalmologist asked the dentist, can you see parchment? Can you see writing on parchment? And my boss said, well, give it a try. So we took an image, just a single standard X-ray image that you'd get in a hospital, played around with the contrast a bit, and you can kind of see there's just enough contrast to pick out a couple of letters from that. Not great, but it was a start, and then kind of no more really happened for it for a while, and then other people got interested, and we really got into the business of scanning documents. So just a quick word about damage. X-rays are damaging to living things. If you have your X-ray, the guy that's taking the X-rays goes and stands behind a LED screen while he's giving you a 10-second exposure of X-rays. What do they do to dead things? It turns out the only case we've ever seen any damage to things we're scanning, if it was soaking wet parchment, so it smelt like a rotting dead dog, we gave it 8 hours of exposure with X-rays. There was a slight darkening. 20 hours, it darkened a bit more, but it did eventually fade. So we don't really have an issue with damage as far as we can tell. So sometime later, we had some money to build a machine to scan scrolls. And then the BBC were like, oh, you're scanning scrolls. Have you found anything? Can we come and film you? So they did. And now I just pinch some of their video. So this was filmed for the One show. This was a scroll from the Norfolk Record Office. It had been sealed up. It was actually too damaged to unroll. They knew it was written in iron gall ink. They knew it was written on parchment. But you could only unroll about the first 20 centimetres of the scroll. Beyond that, it had got damp. It had stuck together. You couldn't unroll any further. So we got involved and had a go at scanning. And the scanning process is very sped up in this case. What you have is our X-ray gun, fires a beam of X-rays this way, and that's our camera, which slides backwards and forwards to sort of take longer strip images. And we rotate the sample, we rotate the scroll. So you can see the scroll is spinning, and we also move it up and down because we can scan about an inch at a time, and then we scan another inch. And each inch block takes about a day to scan. So this is a slow process. What were the initial results? Well, the initial results were something like this. So we had this was actually an earlier scroll we did, about 100 millimeters long, 2 dried up and hard to unroll. When we did our scan, so you're looking at a slice through this scroll. If this scroll was projected out of the board, you're looking at a slice just cut through. Ink shows up nicely as bright white area. So this is where the X-rays are being attenuated, the X-rays are being stopped. You're looking at this in negative. So dark areas that would be dark from ink show up white in this. And we start to see spots of ink. We also see a gold foil, which is just about visible on the end here. And we thought maybe we can do something with this. So we've got some friends at the University of Cardiff who are experts in computer vision. And we gave it to them and said, can you unroll this? And they came back to us sometime later and said, yep, this is what it says. And so this was only unrolled in a computer. They used MATLAB, wrote some programs to do the unrolling, and you can read it. There's a lot of noise in the background that could be removed, but you can see there's text there. And so as a proof of concept, we thought that's pretty good. But then we had to get the real one unrolled just as a proof of concept, because maybe the computer just made this up. Maybe that isn't what it really says. No one's ever going to check it. You can't unroll the original, so yeah, we'll say we've done it. So we got the original unrolled. Megan Smith, who's in the audience, worked on this. She managed to do the conservation magic to unroll this. And you can see some of the words look about the same: tenement adjoining to the message, tenement accept, whatever. And you can flick backwards and forwards between this and convince yourself it says the same thing. It's a good approximation. Yeah, it's good. There's no approximation to it. So then we got involved in this Bressingham roll. So this is the one that's in the time-lapse video that I showed. This dates from 1409, roughly. Actual size, it's probably about 30 centimetres long. Maybe a metre and a half, 2 metres in total length. But you can only unroll about the first 20 centimetres or so. If you try to unroll it anymore, you start getting these big tears in it as layers are stuck together. There was an indication of what it said. They knew it would be the annual accounts of the Manor of Bressingham, but you can't read what the rest of it says. So we spoke to the conservators and archivists there. They packaged it up ready for scanning in a material called plastozote, which is sort of conservation grade stable. It means I can, carefully handle this, and I'm not going to put grease and my lunch and everything over this item that's stood around for ages. So, Bressingham roll. We scan it, we took a virtual slice, it was a mess. You can see that areas are stuck together. This informed the conservators they were never going to be able to unroll this anyway. These layers are stuck. So, BBC came along, they'd filmed this. It went through as much of the virtual unrolling process as we could do. This is kind of flash stuff done for camera by the University of Cardiff. And text appears. And we were able to get some data out of this. Comparing the X-ray image and the visible image on the areas we can see, it matches up quite well. Some areas that are really faded out show up nicely in the X-rays, but again, you've got a lot of this background noise. But the results so far are pretty good. We managed to get the whole of the length of the scroll. There's still the width. There's still, another 2/3 of the width, but most of the content is on the left-hand side, which was good. We did some other stuff with a birch bark scroll. There's no ink on this. This is just blunt pressure, and we were able to get something that, as initial results, it looks like you can actually see the cellular structure has been collapsed as you press hard on this. But something different. Someone came along and said, okay, you can scan rolled up things. I've got this really old, decrepit, horrible looking film. It's degraded. It came from a shack somewhere in South Africa. I think it's got something really cool on it. Show me what you can do, and then I'll let you have a go at this, and then we can make everybody really happy. So we had a go. We did a proof of concept. We had just a piece of rolled up film, 16mm acetate stock, in good condition. Galmont British News, Galmont Company was mentioned earlier. Rolled up, we scanned it, we kind of convinced ourselves we'd see nothing. And indeed you do see nothing in just that image. But magic happened. That is only played back through X-rays. No light was put through this. It was never unrolled. We did it all virtually, and we got the soundtrack out of it. That was pretty good. We were quite happy with that. We showed it to Charles Norton from the BBC, who's like their film archivist guy who had this really good thing, and he was like, yep, okay. Well, the thing I've got is in terrible condition. You can't make it any worse. It's suffering what they call vinegar syndrome, so it's actually auto-catalyzing its own destruction. He said, yeah, we're going to be fishing this out of the can with a ladle within about 18 months. What can you do? So we had a go. We scanned small sections of this. It had to be cut to scan this. We can't fit the whole thing in our scanner, but it was never going to survive otherwise. And he said, well, he told us what this is, and he went, it's the only known existing copy of the first episode of the Morecambe and Wise show. And so we scanned it. We didn't expect it. We scanned our first 1-inch cube block. And as we're scrolling through the data, scrolling through the images, we saw this image, and it's like, you can actually see there's a person there. Couldn't identify who it was. And we scanned on a bit further, and it's like 2 faces leapt out. Eric Morecambe, Ernie Wise. You don't need to have been around when the first show came out, but they are pretty much identifiable to British people. They're known faces. The elation when we saw that, I cannot describe. It was just, it worked. We went and had a cup of tea. The latest results look a lot more like that. We're working on, we're not going to be able to get the whole thing back. We're never going to get the whole first episode entirely watchable. We're getting maybe 1/3 to 2/3 of the frames. Each of these strips is quite a lot of work to get. And once you spend about 24 hours to scan the block, and then each block gets split into the layers of the film, all done in a IDL script language. And then someone just has to sit there for a long time working out how that frame is warped and virtually pulling it backwards and forwards until you get the best looking image. And then you hit the magic button, which tries to make what you've done better. Pretty good so far. We will never be able to get the soundtrack. That looks good, you think we've got the soundtrack, but that's 1 frame, 2 frames. If you played that back, it would just be a click. We're never going to get the soundtrack, but somebody in Australia recorded the soundtrack when it was first broadcast, so we have that. So it's good. That was the use of CT scanners. How am I doing for time? Okay. The abuse of CT scanners. So I have a CT scanner sitting behind me. What else can you do? So all of the foregoing was proper science. What do I mean by proper science? Someone paid me to do it. But the scanner in my office is literally 30 centimetres behind my chair. I have to be careful when I push my chair back from the desk that I don't hit the power off switch. So I've got a scanner in the office. What can I do? I can x-ray my lunch. What happened was I bought an apple one day and it had a hole in it, kind of like that. And I was in 2 minds whether I was going to eat this or I'm going to get a mouthful of extra protein I wasn't banking on. And the scanner was sitting there doing nothing, so I scanned it. Just took a single image. This is the actual image I took. The maggot was nowhere to be seen in it. So I ate the apple, and it was fine. Was my food already worm food? No, was the answer. And so I posted that image on Twitter with the tag, X-ray my lunch. Do you want to guess what it is? And people guessed, and it all went well. So I just started posting more and more of these things. As I get something interesting, I scan it, I post it. Any guesses? Yeah, Kinder Egg. Kinder Egg with a toy car. I was going to enter this for an imaging competition. Someone else had actually had the same idea and done a better job than I had, but they actually coloured it, they did everything. But I kind of got there first, but they did it better. Another one. Any guesses? Remember the bone structure I spoke about earlier? It's a chicken wing. It gets difficult to find new and interesting things. I tend to eat similar things every day for lunch, but things like that show up quite frequently in the stream. I try not to show the same thing every time. Any guesses? Yeah, Snickers or Marathon bar. Anyone that knows me should get this one pretty easily. Yep, nice cup of tea. This was one that got everybody. Nobody got this one. This one took a long time for anyone to get this. I'm showing it in negative form as well. Yeah, everyone thought it was a mushroom, an upside down mushroom with that being the stem. the clue, which probably is not showing up quite so well, there's some hairs there. Yes! I think quite a few people were guessing on Twitter for most of the afternoon. I'm not sure how much work got done that day as people were trying to guess. Everybody was guessing mushroom, vol-au-vent, everything, till somebody spotted the hairs. A nice pork scratching. So then a pork scratching company got in contact with me and said, if we send you some pork scratchings, will you scan them and do some interesting stuff? And I got back from a couple of days off. Got into the office and there was a box of pork scratchings sitting there waiting for me, so I need to do something interesting. Yeah. And then X-ray my lunch hang on, it's coming up to December. Let's X-ray my advent. So I scanned a different Christmas themed object every day. These are just single projections, single images, so this takes about 10 seconds to acquire the image. I'm not tying up my scanner with useless things. This one, nobody. I think one person guessed after I'd announced what it was, and they may or may not have already seen the answer. So I ended up putting up an annotated form. It was just a Ferrero Rocher. But people wouldn't believe that, so I ended up actually annotating what was going on. I think I did a full CT scan of this in the end, just to prove to people really what it was. So you've got the paper foil and cup, you've got the wafer shell chocolate nut filling. Of course, what happened one day was I forgot to X-ray my lunch. And I did get the protein that I was not expecting to get. I took the photograph just after I'd taken the bite and thought, this doesn't taste right. I didn't actually get the worm, but I got everything the worm had previously been eating. So now I X-ray my lunch every day. I tend to post things under this. So if you look on Twitter, DTO on Twitter, or just these hashtags, X-ray my lunch will be generally what I'm eating if I haven't scanned it before. X-ray stuff in my lab is when I'm walking around the lab and it's, I don't know what this is, let's have a look inside it. X-ray all the things is when someone says, I've got X, it's really cool, but I don't know what's inside it. So I send it to me and I'll throw it in the machine and we'll post it and see if anyone can guess. And then X-ray history is kind of where I post all the heritage stuff. So if I'm scanning interesting scrolls and stuff, that's where you'll tend to find that. Come play along on Twitter, please, it's good fun. It's better than working. Acknowledgements. So Graham Davis, Paul Rosin, UK Lie were the people sort of, Graham Davis was my boss at the time. Paul Rosin and Yukon are the guys that actually do the virtual unrolling. Antoinette Curtis, Megan Smith, Caroline Di Stefani are the archivists and conservators that we've convinced to let us play with their heritage materials that they don't usually let out. And Charles Norton, the BBC, are the people we're doing the Morecambe and Wise stuff for. Thank you for your attention.